Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dream Team web series. I am super excited to introduce Catherine Johns. Catherine coaches entrepreneurs and executives to stand up, stand out, and make their message more magnetic. Because when you speak with power and presence, you have more impact to change the world. She is also the author of Show Up and Shine, Simple Steps to Boost Your Confidence and Charisma. She is here speaking with us today about speaking with confidence, which doesn't come easy for most. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Catherine.
It is my pleasure, Natasha.
So I just wanted you to share something about yourself, maybe go into how you got into speaking.
Okay. I had a 25-year career in radio. I went into radio because people said, "Oh my God, you have a voice." And in radio, well, you know what? I used to say I had a great face for radio. In a way, I was hiding behind a microphone because people hear you, but they don't see you. It was a very big deal to come out from behind the microphone and stand in front of audiences. And it wasn't entirely comfortable for me for a long time. I learned some things about how to do it well, and that's what I coach my clients to do too.
Amazing. I love that. And I do, it's interesting because communicating is something we do the moment we're born, right? Yet we're so uncomfortable and unfamiliar with it. So I want you to break it down to me how you work with your clients and on building that, because that is something that doesn't come natural to most. And yeah.
All right. So you start where you start any building. You start with the foundation, and the foundation is your feet, which means, people think, oh, we're talking about my mouth and my words and my language. And yes, we are. But first, it starts with your feet. So your feet are flat on the floor, and you're grounded and centered and really planted. For people who do yoga, you're familiar with mountain pose. That's where we begin. When you have that sense that you are so firm and so grounded and so centered that you can't be pushed around. And then from there, of course, as a speaker, you move. You walk across a stage or you move toward your audience. But always you move and then you plant yourself and you come back to that sense of being grounded and kind of stacked up in a straight line from your feet all the way to the top of your head. The more people do something like this, where you're leaning or you're tilting or you're bent, the less power they have.
Oh, wow. I didn't even realize that.
Well, you start watching speakers, and it's true for a lot of us, we do much of our work sitting. So we work on web-based platforms like this. So I'm sitting in a chair, but my feet are firmly on the floor. My bottom is in the seat of the chair, planted. I'm not like this, because you can see when I do this, when I cross my legs, tilt my body, bend myself, two things happen. I look less powerful or less strong, and my voice changes. So we really need this being grounded to support a full, rich voice, which starts from down here below the navel, that power center in the lower belly. In Japan, they call it hara. In Chinese, it's dandian, and it's down here. We want to breathe from there. We want to pull the energy from that lower belly power center all the way up and out. So
it's also really calming when you do that as well. It
like calms
nerves. I think when you're speaking, a lot of people, you're doing pitches or you're talking to a group. Or even if you're in an important meeting one-on-one, sometimes your nerves could get to you. And even planting your feet down may not work, or sitting up straight. It's just your nerves. So I think the breathing really helps.
It makes a huge difference. When we're nervous or uncomfortable, we tend to breathe more shallowly. And all of our energy gets concentrated up here in our shoulders and our neck. You'll see people get their jaw really tense. One of the things I do with clients is talk about opening your mouth. The vertical opening, makes a difference in the sound of the voice. When I'm like this, my voice is going to be tight and small and less appealing to listen to.
Yes. So do you think projection has a lot to do with that as well, exuding power? Or do you feel like that has nothing to do with it? You don't want to really project because sometimes that could put people off?
Do you mean project your voice?
Yeah,
Is that what
like,
you're talking about?
mhm.
Well, yes, I do think it's about projecting your voice, but that's not necessarily about volume. In other words, you can have a lot of energy in your voice and speak quite softly. Or you can be very loud. I don't want to be too loud because it'll be distorted on the microphone, but the energy in it can be present whether the volume is loud or soft. And really effective speakers vary their volume because it keeps people more interested.
Yes. I find it's more engaging when you actually accentuate the points that you're trying to make in the message, and you build up to it, because
Absolutely.
people stay engaged with you instead of like this monochromatic conversation that you're having with someone.
Right. Monotone is boring and monospace is boring. That's why we move when we speak, or we use gesture when we speak. Because
Interesting.
if I just stand still and don't move, and you'll see people, especially in my experience, corporate people, accountants, financial people, engineers, people who tend to be less expressive and more analytical, also often don't use much gesture. And it's boring to watch them. And so part of the coaching is, how do I use my hands, my face, my whole body to convey my message?
Yeah, and how do you use your like other parts of your bodies to convey your message? Because
So
it's not only the way you speak, it's also how you present yourself with gesture.
absolutely. So here's a quick thing about gesture. Powerful gestures have a beginning and an end. They don't just go on forever. So you can see when I flail my hands around like this, I start to look like I may not know exactly what I'm talking about, kind of like a teenage girl at the mall on Saturday afternoon. So powerful gestures start and stop. Hands come to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And then you gesture again. But you gesture for a purpose. You gesture to convey some meaning, not just to discharge energy. So when we're nervous, we talked about the energy gets stuck up in the shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we have a tendency to click a pen or play with a ring or a bracelet or hair. You'll see women especially do this kind
I
of
do that a
stuff.
lot.
No, oh no, Natasha, it's a good thing you have your hair pulled back, because
I
that'll
know, that's why I like to put it back.
good for you, because that, two things: when we fidget in any way, we look nervous or uncomfortable, and people pick up on those cues, Natasha, at a non-conscious level. So they don't look at you and say, oh, she is playing with her earring, I think she's nervous. They just see it, they register it, and they think somewhere inside, she's not very comfortable. Maybe she's hiding something from me. Maybe there's a topic she doesn't want to talk about. Maybe she's about to try to sell me something she knows I don't want. I better put up a barrier now.
Yeah.
So we read all those cues at a non-conscious level and process them. And those are how we form our impressions of people. So fidgety gestures are not helpful in any way. And the hair thing particularly is really, people associate that with little girls.
Oh.
And in business, you don't want to look like a little girl. You want to look like a full-grown adult woman who knows her stuff. And so things like playing with your hair or talking in a tiny little voice with that question mark at the end of a sentence, those things reduce our credibility in an instant.
So what would you suggest to someone who was just extremely nervous? What would be the one tip you would give them just going into a meeting or just addressing someone?
It's what I said before: sense your feet on the floor. That, as soon as I start to do that, when we're nervous, we forget we even have a body. It's like we're a head walking around on tiny little feet. And so if I can come into a consciousness of my body and breathe, immediately I will begin to calm down. It lowers the center of gravity in my body. It calms the physical nervousness, and it begins to shift my voice so that I sound more confident and more in control.
Awesome. And how would you, now that I'm thinking about this, because I know sometimes, especially as a woman, I could feel like my voice doesn't matter. And how, like, I understand the planning of the feet, making sure that you're up straight, but how do you have, what do you tell people who just have like that self-doubt in them, that even though they may look like when they do the role playing with you, they seem confident, but they just don't feel it.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to that inner voice, for them to stay to that inner voice in them?
So are you familiar with the power poses? Amy Cuddy's work about power poses?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I really encourage that. You know, there's been a big flap in the world of social psychology with people who have challenged her research and said it doesn't really change your hormones and all of that. What I can speak to from my own experience and from the experience of my clients is whether it's a hormone change or not, there's something that shifts internally when we expand our body and fully occupy our space.
Mm-hmm.
And what she suggested to people was to hold those poses for 2 minutes. And that's enough to get that shift in energy. So what we do, we're in an important meeting, or maybe we're waiting for a job interview or a client appointment. We sit in the lobby on our phone, right? All hunched over, looking down like this. That is not helpful. It's the opposite. We should go into the ladies' room, plant ourselves, and stand like this or like this,
Mm-hmm.
and do something big and expansive that allows the energy to move. What we experience as nervousness is just energy stuck someplace in our body.
Oh,
So
wow.
anything you can do to move it will help you.
I didn't even think of it like that. Like, it's just this energy that's just stuck.
Yeah.
And you just put it in, you centralize it, and then you just have to kind of like let it go to be free.
Yeah.
That's a great, I just visualize that in my head right now. It's like, that's really impactful. Just
it will really help you. You'll be surprised at the shift you can get in a short amount of time just by consciously opening your body, especially across the chest, so that you can breathe really freely. And you can begin to feel more intense, more powerful, more in control the moment you take up more space. For women who are small, petite, that can be a challenge. And so even, you know, a lot of speaking coaches will tell you don't put your hands on your hips because it reminds people of their mother, like you're scolding them. I disagree. I think for small women especially, if you're in front of an audience, anything you can do to expand the space you occupy will be helpful. And so one hand on a hip can actually be very helpful because it just makes you more of a presence in front of a room.
Yeah, because you're taking up more space. Because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
What are the things that you would be like are no's? Like, I know one thing is don't ever cross your arms because it's like you're closed off. Like, what are definite no's, and like what doesn't project confidence or power?
Yeah. So I'm a believer that there are no definite no's, because there's going to be a time when anything will work. Like I was just describing, one hand on a hip. For some people, that really works well. There are things I do that other speakers don't do, partly because I have a strong presence. I can't tell you how many times, Natasha, people have said to me, you know, when I first met you, I was a little bit intimidated. Well, that's not helpful for me. And so I soften intentionally to counteract that. But that's not the advice I would give for most of my clients. For most of my clients, especially women, and even more especially young women, they need to be stronger, more powerful, more in command, not less. Yeah. So with that, it's part about this posture. I would say stay away from fidgety gestures. I worked with a coach once who said nothing good can happen when your hands are above your shoulders. That is good advice. You want to use your hands in an area, kind of what if you were holding a beach ball in the middle of your body, in that space. And as soon as people start touching their face or holding their neck, you see that looks very vulnerable. That's, I mean, even in the animal kingdom, right? Animals cover their carotid when they're threatened. Yeah. So you want to keep your hands away from your face, avoid fidgety gestures, avoid aimless movement, swaying or shuffling from foot to foot, but do use purposeful movement because it keeps the audience engaged. Yeah. And stay away from language that minimizes your expertise. So by that I mean, I just want to tell you, I have this little project I'm working on. I'm only, any of those minimizing words convey uncertainty or unimportance. And when you're in front of an audience, you want it to be clear that you're important, your work is important.
Wow, those are great tips. Minimizing words. Wow. I never thought of it that way. I also, what I've noticed a lot, and I do this myself as well, I'll go, and, or like, and I just think that's just something that my generation has learned just from talking to one another. Would you suggest getting over that?
That takes practice, and part of it is getting comfortable with silence. So that was a pause, and it was a very intentional pause. But a lot of people are nervous about pausing because they're afraid it'll seem that they don't know what they're doing or that they'll lose their audience. My experience is that it's actually the opposite. People don't stop listening when you pause. They actually lean in because they're waiting for what comes next. So getting comfortable with those moments of silence will make a difference.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. I know for sure the silence thing works because I've tried it in the past. And then people are just like, and then I feel like too, they get caught off guard and then they feel like they need to speak. So then you get a gist of like where they are in the conversation as well. And I think too, part of being a good speaker is listening. Which a lot of us tend to like just let it speak and never listen to someone. So
yes. Yeah, you are so right. I actually do a workshop about listening. There's hardly any demand for that. People want to be better speakers, but nobody really wants to be a better listener. For anybody who sells anything, listening is probably the most important skill you could develop.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think enough people listen.
No, I think you're right.
So I just wanted to share with the audience that Catherine is amazing. She's sharing the 39 keys to command a room and connect with an audience. And so I would like for you to share with the audience today what that actually is and what that consists of.
It is a list of 39 quick tips that are separated into chunks of there's some about command, there's some about connection, there's some about the words you say, the actual language you use, and there are some tips about how to use your body as well, that if you put all of those into practice, you would be a masterful speaker. And they're fast and digestible.
Is it a video? Is it a
Oh no, it's a tip sheet. It's a really 39 tips is exactly what it is. I called it the power, presence, and profit principles.
Oh, that's great.
Because it's a reminder of some of the things we've talked about today and some additional suggestions that will help you really stand out when you speak in front of a bigger audience or even at a conference table with a small group.
What a great compliment to this, basically to this interview. I just think that's perfect. One of the questions I always ask every speaker, and I think is really important, is what would be your number one advice to every entrepreneur building a business to execute their vision?
Communication is the key. And that's true, I think, universally. You know that I just came back from a trip to Senegal where I was coaching women in Dakar and also in a couple of smaller cities and really a village where literally the audience was 20 women or so, some of them nursing babies as I was doing my program. And I had 2 translators, a donkey, and 3 goats in the audience. I mean, it was such a different experience for me. But the principles are the same. How do we convey our value? How do we communicate that people need what we have to offer? And that's true whether I'm in a tiny village speaking Serer or in the United States speaking business style English. Yeah. It's all about communication.
Communicating what you have to offer. And I think that's just a good point in general in life because we all have something of value to offer. And I just think it's finding out what that message is, finding clarity in it, and then finding the confidence to pursue it. And that could be with speaking engagements. That could be with just sharing it and pitching it to people. So I just think communication is the number one key factor after finding clarity for me in your purpose. That's like right there, right? Like that's super important. Yeah. Even just like day-to-day conversation.
Well, yes, it really is. I mean, think about how many problems come up because we have failed to communicate well.
Yeah.
What?
And assumptions and
all of that.
Other types.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine. I just know from the first time I spoke to you, it was just like speaking to a friend like that I've known.
Well, thank you.
So it was just amazing. I was looking forward to this. And I just want the audience to know, to learn more about Catherine and her amazing work, just visit catherinejohns.com. That will be in the video and on the page. So just feel free to link. Also, the free offer will be on the page as well. So please take advantage of this segment and offering as we commit ourselves to becoming the best versions of ourselves every single day. You are the only one who can create your own vision to be successful. So why not start and do that today? Thank you so much for joining, and thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Natasha. We'll stay in touch.
Yes.